So I'm going to dice onion and peel and slice this butternut squash. Let's start with the butternut squash. So you can cut off the top and the bottom, and then we're going to peel it, and then I'm going to cut off this bottom part, so all that's left is kind of this long section, and I'm going to slice these into noodles. Okay, so make sure you have a sharp knife, and it can help if it's really rolly to kind of shave off a little portion there. So I'm going to cut off the top and cut off the bottom. All right, and I'll discard those after. So now I'm going to peel, and it's important that you're using a sharp peeler here as well. Okay, next up, I'm going to create a slice here, and then this bottom portion, you can just roast on its own. You can take the seeds out, and you can roast the seeds. All right, you would take those all out, and you can kind of cut this in half and fill that with something. But I'm gonna slice this into lasagna noodles. I've seen other people use a mandolin, not really my jam. A sharp knife does the trick. You just wanna make sure that you get nice even slices and that you are very careful. And depending on the size of your butternut squash, you know, you might even cut these in half depending on the size of your dish as well. Okay, next I'm gonna dice this onion. Actually, I'm gonna slice it. You could do either. I kind of like the slices a little bit better. And I've taken sort of knife skills classes before. I've watched chefs, and there's definitely like more than one way, and there's better ways to do things. But honestly, I think when you're self-taught, you find ways to do things that work best for you. That's how I do it. So the only other real cooking tools you'll need is a wide, deep enough pan or a pot, and then something to cook your lasagna in. I'm gonna get this sausage started on the stove. And this is about a ½ pound to 3/4 pound of bulk loose sausage. I actually usually buy it on sale, already all cased up, and I take it out of the casing and put it in the freezer exactly for reasons like this. So I'm gonna let the sausage start to brown before I add the onions and cook that down. Generally, if I was making this on my own, I would have started with this first while I prepared the veggies, just to save a little bit of time. But again, mise en place, you wanna be organized first. All right, so my sausage is cooking, and in case you're wondering what this is, just a little trick. This is actually a trifold that helps keep things from splattering. So the sausage has, you know, some fat in it, so it's gonna kind of splatter a little bit. I'll move this out of the way though. But when I'm cooking, I like to kind of set that up. So the sausage is turning brown, and I'm gonna add in all the onions, and then kind of turn it down and cover it and let it cook. And while that's happening, really, this is super simple. So what I would do is, after this cooks down, add in diced tomatoes, as well as finishing it with a touch of cream. I'm actually going to use this Rayo's tomato sauce because I have it on hand. I'm not going to use the whole jar, but just kind of enough. And I'm still going to add the cream because I think it really complements the butternut squash nicely. Once that sauce is done, I'm going to layer it with the butternut squash in the baking dish. So this is cooked down, and I'm going to add my sauce. Again, diced tomatoes works really great if you don't have sauce, especially if you've added garlic. I'm going to start with about 1.5 cups to 2 cups. It really just depends how much kind of tomatoiness you want versus how much cream. Okay, so that was 2 cups of sauce. I'm going to stir that around. And when I originally made this, I didn't include spinach, but I have spinach. And any other kind of green that you like to cook and wilt down, you can add. I'm going to add the spinach next. I'm actually going to turn the heat off because obviously this will cook more in the oven. Okay, so nice and incorporated there. And I'm just going to start to add handfuls of spinach. And if you've ever cooked with spinach before, you know you start with a lot and then it comes down to nothing, right? So it really just depends on how much you want. If you just want to throw it in to add some extra nutrition and boost the fiber content, and frankly just to use the spinach you have on hand, that's great. If you want to include a lot of spinach, maybe you know, if you're not including meat and you want some bulk in there, that would be a great option as well. So I'm going to cook this spinach down and then just add a touch of cream. And really, I'm going to just eyeball it. There's not an exact amount, I don't think. It just depends how much you want, how much you can tolerate. That was about 3 cups of raw spinach. I think frozen defrosted spinach would work well too. You just want to make sure you've let out some of the moisture or account for that when you're adding tomato sauce, so it's not too wet, right? You want this kind of thick because the butternut squash also has moisture in it that it's going to release when you bake it. So I'm going to just cook that down a little bit, and again, not too much because it's going to go in the oven, and I'm just going to add a touch of cream, a couple tablespoons to start, see how it looks. It almost gives it like a vodka sauce quality without the vodka, right? And the cream I really do think goes nicely with the butternut squash. So once this is reduced a little bit, I'm going to start to layer it in with the squash, and that's it. This is also really good just on its own, frankly, over pasta, or if you wanted to put it over spiralized butternut squash or zucchini noodles or even spaghetti squash. And here's the final step, which is to assemble. I have my butternut squash noodles and I have my filling right here. I'm going to start off with some noodles on the bottom of this baking dish. This is just what I have. You could use a square one if you had that as well. And I'm just trying to cover as much of the bottom as possible. So it's not going to be like perfect, but I'm going to use kind of different sizes and different pieces to try to get as much covered as possible. And if there's gaps, it's not really a big deal. So, all right, just trying to lay down as much as you can. And then I'm going to scoop a layer of sauce on top next. I mentioned earlier that the squash itself does release some liquid, so just keep that in mind. It's totally fine. You can kind of just drain it out when you're done with it. It'll just be a little bit extra, but do a nice kind of even layer of sauce across. Make sure you're covering most of the noodles, right? And you're spreading out the spinach evenly as well. I think this should get like three layers. So then you can see there, right? All that sauce looking great. And I'm going to do another layer of lasagna. Okay, last step here is to add the cheese. I have an Italian blend. You could just bake it as is and then maybe just put some Parmesan on top. I really like it cheesy. That's the point of lasagna, if you ask me. I'm sure you can use a vegan cheese. It's not something I eat or really experiment with, so I can't tell you exactly how it would turn out, but I do think kind of the cheese on top, that's really what makes it delicious. So I'm going to bake it for about an hour at 375, and then before serving, I'm going to broil the top so the cheese gets nice and melty. Came out of a 375-degree oven for about 45 minutes. As you can see, it's really hot and bubbly. It's really going to depend on you and your oven to know exactly when this is done. So I'm just sticking a fork in here, and you can see that butternut squash is really tender. I'm going to turn the broiler on and finish it on broil. I did mention, notice all this extra liquid here that's going to happen because of the butternut squash. It'll kind of settle down, and just when you cut it and remove it, just keep that in mind.